The room was always quiet after midnight. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that pressed against your ears until you started noticing every small sound. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the faint wind slipping through the edges of the window. She had grown used to it, or at least she told herself she had. Living alone in a city that never really felt like home had a way of making silence feel louder than noise. Her fingers rested around a half-empty mug of coffee gone cold hours ago. She didn't remember when she had made it. Maybe it was just something to hold on to. Something to fill the emptiness that seemed to stretch across the room. The dim yellow light above her cast soft shadows on the walls, turning ordinary objects into something distant, almost unfamiliar. She sat near the window, knees pulled close, watching the faint glow of streetlights outside. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights brushing across the glass before disappearing into the night. For a moment it always felt like something was about to happen, but nothing ever did. Her phone lay beside her, screen dark. She hadn't touched it in a while, though she kept glancing at it without realizing. It wasn't like she was waiting for anything important. Not anymore. A faint vibration broke the stillness. She didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, she stared at it, as if acknowledging it too quickly would make it seem like she cared more than she wanted to admit. The vibration stopped. Silence returned. Then again, another short buzz. This time, she picked it up. A message. Her eyes moved across the screen, and for a brief second, something shifted in her expression. Not quite surprise, not quite curiosity, but something in between. It wasn't from her boyfriend. That realization lingered longer than it should have. She exhaled slowly, her thumb hovering over the screen. There was no reason to feel anything about it. Messages came and went. People texted. It didn't mean anything. Still, she didn't open it right away. Instead, her mind drifted back to earlier that evening. The short, dry conversation she had with him. If it could even be called a conversation. A few words exchanged, more out of routine than interest. His tone had been distant, distracted, like she was just another task to check off before he moved on to something else. It hadn't always been like that. Or maybe it had, and she just hadn't noticed. Her grip on the phone tightened slightly. She finally opened the message. Simple. Casual. Almost too normal. She read it once. Then again. There was nothing special about the words themselves, but something about them felt different. Lighter. As if they carried a tone she hadn't felt directed at her in a long time. She locked the phone and placed it back down. A few seconds passed. Then she picked it up again. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard this time. She typed a few words. Paused. Deleted them. Typed something else. Deleted again. A small, almost ironic smile touched her lips. Why was she overthinking this? It was just a reply. Nothing more. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. She placed the phone on the table again and leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. The silence returned, heavier now, filled with thoughts she didn't want to examine too closely. She thought about how long it had been since she felt genuinely noticed. Not in a grand dramatic way, just in the small details. The way someone asks how your day was and actually waits for the answer. The way someone remembers the things you casually mention. When was the last time that happened? She couldn't remember. Her phone lit up again. Another message. This time she didn't hesitate as long. She opened it quickly, almost instinctively. Her eyes scanned the words, and again that same feeling, subtle, unfamiliar, but undeniably there. She leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on her knees. This wasn't supposed to matter, and yet it did. She glanced around the room as if expecting something to interrupt the moment, but everything remained still. The same quiet walls. The same dim light. The same life she had been living for months. Nothing had changed. Except this, her fingers moved across the screen again. This time, she didn't delete immediately. She read what she wrote, hesitated, then erased only part of it. Adjusted the words. Softer. More neutral. Safer. Or at least that's what she told herself. She stared at the message for a long second. There was a line, thin, invisible, but very real. And she was standing right at the edge of it. On one side, everything stayed the same. Predictable. Controlled. Empty maybe, but stable. On the other side, she didn't know. And that uncertainty was exactly what made it dangerous. Her heart beat just a little faster, though she couldn't say why. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something closer to anticipation, mixed with doubt. She told herself it didn't mean anything. That a reply was just a reply. People talked all the time. There was no hidden meaning unless she chose to give it one. That thought made it easier. Easier to justify. Easier to ignore the quiet voice in the back of her mind. She took a slow breath, her thumb hovering one last time. Then, before she could overthink it again, she pressed send. The message disappeared from her screen, replaced by a small, simple confirmation, and just like that, something shifted. The room was still the same. The silence hadn't changed. The night continued outside her window as if nothing had happened, but she felt it at a small, irreversible step into something she couldn't take back. She set the phone down gently, her gaze lingering on it for a moment longer than necessary. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't just a conversation anymore. And that was exactly why she didn't try to stop it. The reply came faster than she expected. She had barely set her phone aside before it vibrated again, the sound cutting clean through the quiet like it had been waiting for her. This time she didn't hesitate. Her hand moved almost immediately, fingers wrapping around the device as if it had suddenly become something important. Her eyes scanned the message, and for the first time that night, she felt something shift more clearly, something warmer, lighter. The tone was easy, almost effortless, like there was no weight behind it. No expectations. No pressure. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders loosening without her realizing it started simply. A few words. Then a few more. Nothing personal at first. Just casual conversation, the kind that didn't demand anything but attention. But that was the difference, it had her attention. Fully, minutes passed without her noticing. The cold coffee sat untouched. The clock continued ticking, but it no longer felt loud. The silence that once pressed against her now felt filled, occupied by something new. Her phone lit up again. And again. Each message pulled her in a little further. She found herself smiling at things that weren't even particularly funny. Pausing to think about what to say next. Rereading his words, not because she didn't understand them, but because she wanted to feel them again. It had been a long time since she had done that. Without realizing it, she shifted closer to the edge of her seat, elbows resting on her knees, completely focused now. The room around her faded into the background. At some point, her phone buzzed again, but this time the name on the screen was different. Her expression changed instantly. The warmth faded, replaced by something heavier. Her boyfriend. She stared at the screen for a moment, the contrast hitting harder than she expected. His message was short, direct. No softness. No curiosity. Just words that felt like they were sent out of habit rather than intention. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she flipped her phone over, screen facing down, as if that would make it disappear. A second later, it buzzed again. She exhaled quietly, picking it up this time. Her eyes moved across his message, and just like before, it left her feeling nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Something dull. Familiar in the worst way. No questions. No effort. No sense that he even noticed the distance growing between them. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't type. Instead, she locked the phone and returned to the other conversation. And just like that, the shift became clearer. The messages from him felt different now, more engaging, more alive. He asked things. Not just surface-level questions, but small details. Things she didn't expect anyone to care about. What she was doing. Why she was still awake. Whether she always sat by the window like that. She paused at that last one. Her eyes instinctively moved toward the glass, reflecting her faint outline in the dim light. How did he know that? A small frown crossed her face, quickly replaced by curiosity. She typed a response, careful at first, keeping it vague. But his reply came back just as quickly, smooth, confident in a way that didn't feel forced. He noticed things. That realization settled deeper than she wanted to admit. The conversation drifted naturally from one topic to another. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The space between messages grew shorter, not longer. Neither of them wanted the pause. She adjusted her position, pulling her legs closer, phone held firmly in both hands now. At some point, she realized she was waiting for the vibration, waiting for his reply. That thought made her pause, her fingers stilled over the screen as a quiet awareness crept in. This was changing, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, in a way that felt almost invisible until you stopped to look at it. She thought about ending the conversation. Just stopping here before it went any further. Before it meant anything more than a few exchanged messages in the middle of the night. It would have been easy. A simple excuse. A good night. A delay. But she didn't do it. Instead, she kept replying. The questions became slightly more personal. Not intrusive, but close enough to feel different. He asked about her routine, her work, the things she liked doing when she was alone. She answered more honestly than she expected. There was something about the distance, about not being seen, that made it easier to open up. No pressure. No judgment in his tone, just attention. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. At one point, his message appeared slower than usual. She noticed immediately. Her eyes stayed on the screen, watching, waiting. A few seconds passed. Then a minute. She told herself it didn't matter, but her focus didn't shift. When the message finally came through, she felt a small, unexpected sense of relief. That was when it hit her. She cared. Not deeply. Not completely. But enough. Enough to notice. Enough to wait. Enough to feel the absence. Even for a moment she leaned back slowly, her gaze lingering on the screen. This wasn't just distraction anymore. It was something else. Her phone lit up again, and this time the message was different, short, direct. He suggested meeting. The words sat there, simple but heavy, pulling the air out of the room in a way she hadn't felt before. Her heartbeat slowed, then picked up again, uneven. For a moment she didn't move. Didn't type. Didn't breathe properly. Her eyes read the message once. Then again. Meeting would make it real. Everything up until now had been safe in a way. Just words. Just screens. Easy to justify. Easy to control. But this crossed the line. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone. The silence in the room returned, but it felt different now. Tense, waiting. She typed a response, stopped, deleted it, tried again. This time she kept it simple. A refusal. Polite. Distant. She pressed send quickly, almost as if doing it slowly would change her mind. For a few seconds, she felt relief, like she had pulled herself back just in time. But that feeling didn't last. His reply came, calm and understanding. No pressure. No insistence. That should have made it easier. But instead it made her hesitate again, because now the choice was entirely hers. No push. No force, just an open door. She stared at the screen, her thoughts quieter but heavier. Then, almost without realizing it, she typed again, slower this time, more carefully. Not a yes, but not a no either, something in between. She read it once. Her chest rose with a slow breath, and then, before she could stop herself, she sent it. The moment it disappeared from her screen, she felt it again, that shift, deeper this time. There was no pretending anymore. She told herself it was still just a conversation, but somewhere inside she already knew. It wasn't. The knock came softer than she expected. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. The room had been so still, so wrapped in its usual quiet, that any sound felt out of place. But then it came again, just enough to confirm it was real. Her body tensed before she even realized why. She stood there, unmoving, eyes fixed on the door, as if it might disappear if she waited long enough. Her heartbeat had already begun to rise, slow but heavy, echoing in the silence around her. This was the moment she had been avoiding thinking about. Not because she didn't see it coming, but because thinking about it made it real. She exhaled quietly and took a step forward. Then another. Each movement felt deliberate, almost too loud against the stillness of the room. Her hand hovered near the handle, fingers slightly trembling before she forced them to steady. For a brief second, she considered not opening it. She could pretend she wasn't home. Let the moment pass. Let everything return to the safe distance it had been before. But she didn't. Her fingers closed around the handle, and with a slow, controlled motion, she pulled the door open. He stood there, exactly as expected. And yet not. There was no dramatic shift, no overwhelming feeling. Just a quiet awareness settling between them, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. Neither of them spoke immediately. The air between them felt heavier than it should have, filled with everything that had already been said through messages and everything that hadn't. She stepped aside slightly. A silent invitation. He entered without hesitation. The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. And just like that, the outside world disappeared. For a moment they stood apart, both pretending this was normal. That it was just a visit. Just a conversation that had somehow moved from a screen into real life. She crossed her arms lightly, more out of instinct than comfort, her gaze shifting briefly around the room before settling nowhere in particular. So, she started, her voice quieter than usual, but the word faded before it could become anything more. He responded just as simply, just as carefully. Nothing too direct. Nothing that would force the moment forward too quickly. And yet, it was already moving. They spoke in fragments at first. Small observations. Familiar tones carried over from their messages, but now layered with something different, something heavier. Closer. She became aware of the space between them. Not large. Not small. Just enough to feel intentional. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the table as she moved slightly, grounding herself in something physical. Something real. He noticed things again. The way she paused before speaking. The way her eyes avoided staying in one place for too long. The way her voice softened when she wasn't sure what to say next. And no one had paid attention like that in a long time. And that realization made everything more dangerous. There was a moment, a quiet, fragile moment, where the conversation stopped completely, not because there was nothing to say, but because neither of them needed to say it. She felt it then, that shift, stronger than before, clearer. Her thoughts moved quickly, trying to catch up with what was happening, trying to place boundaries where they had once been so certain, but the lines weren't as solid anymore. They hadn't been for a while. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. He gave a small response, something simple. But it wasn't the words that mattered, it was the way he said them. Calm. Certain. As if this had been inevitable from the beginning, she let out a quiet breath, her gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again. There was something about being here, in the same room, that made everything feel more honest. Or maybe just harder to ignore. She took a step closer. Not enough to make it obvious, just enough to change the distance. He didn't move away. That was all it took. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with something unspoken, something building slowly between them. Her chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm that didn't quite match her thoughts. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. It wasn't supposed to feel this natural. She thought about stopping it, about stepping back, creating space, saying something, anything that would reset the moment before it went too far. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was. And that was the decision. Not a sudden move. Not a dramatic action, just the absence of resistance. He spoke again, softer this time. Not asking. Not pushing. Just understanding. And that was what broke whatever was left of her hesitation. Because it wasn't pressure that made her stay. It was the feeling of being seen. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. Her guard lowering in a way she hadn't allowed in a long time. She met his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then didn't look away. The distance between them closed gradually, naturally, as if neither of them had made a conscious choice to move. The room felt smaller now, warmer. The outside world, her phone, her relationship, all of it faded into something distant and unimportant. What remained was this moment, this feeling. This quiet understanding that didn't need to be explained. Her thoughts slowed, replaced by something simpler. She knew what this meant, she knew where this would lead. And for the first time, she didn't try to stop it. Not because she didn't care, but because in that moment, caring felt less important than feeling. Her eyes closed briefly, not out of fear, but acceptance. And just like that, the line she had once stood in front of disappeared completely. The night moved forward without hesitation after that. No more pauses. No more second thoughts. Only the quiet continuation of a choice she had already made long before the door ever opened. Somewhere deep inside, a voice reminded her of everything this could cost. But it came too late, because in that moment she wasn't thinking about consequences, only about how it felt to no longer be invisible. Morning light slipped through the window without asking permission. It didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like an exposure, slow, quiet, unavoidable. The room looked the same as before, but something about it had changed. Not physically, not obviously, but in the way silence now carried weight instead of comfort. She lay still for a while, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if it might explain how the night had ended so quickly and felt so long at the same time. There was no sound beside her and no movement, just the lingering presence of what had already passed. Eventually, she sat up. Her hair was slightly messy, her thoughts even more so. She didn't rush to fix anything. Not herself. Not the room. Not the moment. Instead, she stayed still, listening to the quiet after everything had already happened. The door was closed. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was that he was gone. No note. No dramatic goodbye. Nothing that tried to define what it was or wasn't. Just absence, simple and clean, like he had never been there at all. She looked at the empty space for a long moment, then looked away. Her phone was on the table. It had been there the whole night, untouched for hours, as if it had become irrelevant in the middle of everything else. Now it seemed louder than anything in the room. She reached for it slowly. The screen lit up instantly. Messages, missed calls. His name appeared more than once. Her boyfriend. She didn't open them immediately. Instead, she held the phone in her hand, feeling its weight more than its purpose. There was a time when these notifications would have meant something urgent. Something that demanded a quick response, an explanation, maybe even concern. Now they just existed, waiting. She unlocked the screen. The messages were short, predictable. A mix of casual check-ins and slightly irritated questions about why she hadn't replied. Nothing unusual. Nothing emotional enough to pull her back in easily. She read them once. Then again. But the second time she wasn't reading the words anymore. She was reading the distance between them. It felt wider than before. Not because of what had happened last night, but because of what hadn't been there long before it. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. For a moment she considered replying. Something normal. Something that would slide her back into the version of her life that had existed before all of this. I was asleep. It would be enough. Simple. Safe. Familiar. But her fingers didn't move. Instead, she locked the phone again and placed it down. The silence in the room returned, but it didn't feel the same as before. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of thoughts she hadn't sorted, feelings she hadn't named, and decisions she hadn't fully understood yet. She stood up and walked toward the window outside. The world continued as if nothing had changed. People moving. Cars passing. Light spreading across buildings that didn't care what had happened in a small room above them. She pressed her hand lightly against the glass, cold, real. Her reflection looked back at her faintly, blurred by the light. She studied it for a second longer than she meant to. Last night didn't feel like a mistake in the way she expected a mistake to feel. It felt more complicated than that. Less like falling. More like stepping into something she had already been leaning toward without admitting it. Her phone buzzed again behind her. She didn't turn right away. She already knew what it would be. And that thought alone told her more than any message could. Eventually, she picked it up again. Another message from him. Shorter this time, different tone. Not angry. Not demanding. Just distant. Like something had already shifted on his side too. Even if he didn't fully understand why. She stared at it. And for the first time she realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't just about last night. It was about everything that had led her here long before it. The quiet conversations that stopped feeling warm. The attention that faded without explanation. The feeling of being present in someone's life without actually being felt in it. Her grip on the phone loosened. Slightly. Not because she knew what to do, but because she didn't feel the urgency to fix anything immediately anymore. That realization should have scared her, but it didn't. Instead, it made everything feel strangely clear. The door behind her room remained closed. No one was there now. No messages were arriving from him either. Just silence again, but different from before. Not empty, finished. She sat down on the edge of the bed, phone resting loosely in her hand. For a long time, she didn't move. Didn't type. Didn't decide. She just existed in the space between what had happened and what would happen next. And for the first time, she understood there was no simple way to return to what she had been before. Not anymore. Her thumb finally moved toward the screen, paused, then lowered again. The phone dimmed in her hand, and she let it. Because whatever came next couldn't be undone by a single message anymore.